What happens when a former royal sits down for what should be a routine interview, but instead delivers shocking accusations that leave even the most seasoned journalist stunned? In just 33 seconds, a single comment would turn a primetime exclusive into one of the most explosive television moments of the year. The stage was set for what millions of viewers expected to be a thoughtful conversation. Anderson Cooper, known for his calm demeanor and careful questioning, unwelcomed his guest onto the iconic 60 Minutes set. The studio lights were perfect. The cameras were rolling. Everything seemed ready for a professional exchange. Meghan Markle arrived with an air of confidence, settling into the interview chair across from Cooper. The veteran journalist opened with a warm greeting, hoping to establish rapport before diving into the questions viewers wanted answered. "Thank you for joining us tonight," Cooper began, his voice steady and welcoming. We're grateful you could take the time to speak with us." Meghan shifted in her seat, offering a tight smile. "Well, I'm here now, aren't I?" The response caught Cooper slightly off guard, but he maintained his composure. He had interviewed countless high-profile figures and knew how to navigate tense moments. He moved forward with his first question. "Let's start with your recent projects," Cooper said, leaning forward slightly. "You've been involved in several initiatives since stepping back from royal duties. Can you tell our viewers what drives your current work?" Meghan's expression changed. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Stepping back? That's an interesting way to phrase it, Anderson. You mean when we were pushed out, don't you?" Cooper remained calm, his years of experience showing. "I'm using the language that was publicly stated at the time, but if you'd like to clarify your perspective, that's exactly why we're here." "My perspective?" Meghan's voice rose slightly. "My perspective is that people like you have been twisting our words from the beginning. You all sit in your comfortable studios and judge situations you know nothing about." The tension in the studio became palpable. Crew members exchanged glances. Cooper, however, did not waver. He had one job: to ask the questions the public wanted answered, and to do so with fairness and professionalism. "I understand this is a sensitive topic," Cooper replied, his tone measured. "But I think our viewers would appreciate hearing about the work you're doing now. Your foundation has announced several partnerships. Could you share more about those?" Meghan waved her hand dismissively. "Of course you'd want to talk about that instead of the real issues. Typical. You people never want to address the actual problems, do you?" "I'm happy to discuss whatever you feel is important," Cooper said, maintaining his professional demeanor. "This is your opportunity to share your story in your own words. What would you like to address?" "What I'd like is for journalists to stop pretending they're objective when everyone knows you all have an agenda," Meghan shot back. "You ask loaded questions and then act innocent when people get upset." Cooper took a slow breath. His patience was remarkable, but this was becoming increasingly difficult. "I can assure you that my only agenda is to have an honest conversation. I've asked about your current projects, which seems like a straightforward topic. But if there's something else on your mind, please share it." Meghan leaned back, crossing her arms. "You want honesty? Fine. I'm tired of people like you acting like you're doing us a favor by giving us airtime. You need us more than we need you. Without people like me, your ratings would be in the toilet." The statement hung in the air. Cooper's expression remained neutral, though there was a brief flash of something in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. But he pressed on. "I think we can agree that 60 Minutes has been fortunate to feature many compelling guests over its 50-plus-year history," Cooper said diplomatically. "And yes, we're grateful when people choose to share their stories here. Now, shall we continue with the interview, or would you prefer to take a moment?" "I don't need a moment," Meghan snapped. "What I need is for you to stop with the condescending tone. 50-plus years of history? Please. Your show is as outdated as the institutions I escaped from." Cooper's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. He had remained professional through countless difficult interviews, but this was entering new territory. Still, he tried once more. I'm sorry you feel that way, he said, his voice still calm, but with an edge that wasn't there before. Let me try a different approach. You mentioned escaping from institutions. Many people would say that you've benefited tremendously from the platform that those institutions provided. How do you respond to that perspective? Meghan's face flushed. Benefited? Is that what you think? You have no idea what I've been through. None. And for you to sit there with your silver spoon upbringing and lecture me about benefits is absolutely rich. I'm not lecturing anyone, Cooper replied, his patience clearly being tested. I'm asking questions. That's what journalists do. And I have to say, if you're uncomfortable answering questions about your public statements and actions, perhaps an interview wasn't the best form for this conversation. Oh, so now you're questioning whether I should even be here? Meghan's voice grew louder. That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. This is exactly the kind of treatment I've been talking about. You invite someone on your show, and then make them feel like they don't belong. Cooper remained seated, his posture straight, his expression serious, but not angry. That's not at all what I said, and I think you know that. I've tried multiple times to steer this conversation in a productive direction. You've responded to every question with hostility. Hostility? You think I'm being hostile? Meghan laughed, but there was no humor in it. You haven't seen Hostel. Try being followed by photographers every day. Try having every word you say twisted and analyzed. Try being criticized for literally everything you do. I understand that public scrutiny is difficult, Cooper said, his voice dropping slightly. But you accepted an invitation to come here tonight. You agreed to this interview. I'm simply trying to do my job, which is to ask you about the topics that you've made public. If that's not something you're prepared to discuss civilly, then we have a problem. Meghan stood up abruptly, her microphone cord pulling tight. A problem? You want to talk about problems? The problem is that people like you think you can summon people like me and expect us to perform for your audience. Well, I'm not a circus act, Anderson. No one said you were, Cooper replied, still seated, still composed. But you did agree to appear on a news program, which involves answering questions. That's not unreasonable. Unreasonable. Meghan's voice reached a new pitch. I'll tell you what's unreasonable. It's unreasonable that I have to sit here and justify my existence to someone who has never walked a day in my shoes. It's unreasonable that you get to sit in judgment while pretending to be neutral. Cooper finally stood, his movement deliberate and calm. I haven't judged you once during this interview. I've asked standard questions that any guest would be asked. Your responses have been defensive and accusatory from the start. I've tried to be patient and understanding, but I'm afraid this isn't working. Not working? Meghan gestured wildly. Of course it's not working. Nothing ever works when you're dealing with the media. You all just want to tear people down. You feed off drama and controversy. Well, congratulations. You got it. That's not fair, Cooper said, his voice firm but still controlled. I've conducted thousands of interviews in my career. I've spoken with presidents, activists, survivors of tragedies, and people from every walk of life. I approach each conversation with respect and a genuine desire to understand. But respect goes both ways. You've shown nothing but contempt since you sat down. Meghan pointed at Cooper, her hand shaking slightly. Don't you dare lecture me about respect. You know what's disrespectful. Having my privacy invaded, having my family attacked, having every single decision scrutinized and criticized. That's disrespect. And none of that has anything to do with me, Cooper said quietly. I'm not responsible for what other media outlets have done. I'm not responsible for the paparazzi. I'm responsible for this interview. And right now, this interview is untenable. You're angry at situations I had no part in, and you're taking it out on me. Oh, here we go, Meghan said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The innocent journalist routine. You're all the same. You're all part of the same system that chews people up and spits them out. Don't pretend you're any different. Cooper shook his head slowly. The disappointment was evident on his face. I'm not pretending anything, but I am drawing a line. I've tried to conduct this interview with professionalism and courtesy. You've responded with attacks and accusations. I don't think we can continue like this." "So that's it?" Meghan laughed bitterly. "You're going to throw me off your precious show? How very predictable. Can't handle someone who actually stands up to you, can you?" "This has nothing to do with standing up to anyone," Cooper said, his voice steady. "This has to do with basic civility. I've interviewed people who have faced far worse circumstances than you, and they've managed to have respectful conversations. This isn't about toughness or courage. It's about being able to communicate like adults." Meghan's face went red. "How dare you compare me to other people? You have no idea what I've dealt with. No idea. And frankly, I don't need to sit here and take this from you or anyone else." "Then perhaps it's best if we end this now," Cooper said, his tone final. "I think it's clear that this interview isn't going to be productive for either of us or for our viewers." "Fine," Meghan snapped, reaching for her microphone to remove it, but she wasn't finished. "You know what your problem is, Anderson? And you think you're better than everyone else. You think because you've been on television for years that you have some kind of authority. Well, you don't. You're just another talking head reading from a script." Cooper stood silent for a moment, letting the words hang in the air. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried weight. "I've never claimed to be better than anyone. I've simply tried to do my job with integrity. But I won't stand here and be insulted for trying to have a professional conversation. I think you should go." "Gladly," Meghan said, yanking the microphone off completely. "This whole thing was a mistake anyway. I should have known better than to expect fairness from someone like you." "Someone like me?" Cooper's eyebrows raised slightly. "What exactly does that mean?" Meghan paused, realizing perhaps she had gone too far. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. "It means exactly what you think it means. You're part of the establishment. You protect the powerful. You're everything that's wrong with mainstream media." Cooper nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I see. Well, I can't control what you think of me or my profession, but I can control what happens on this set. And I'm asking you to leave. Now." "You're asking me?" Meghan's voice reached its highest point yet. "You're actually kicking me off the show? This is unbelievable. Wait until people hear about this. Wait until the world knows how you treat your guests." "They're welcome to watch the footage," Cooper said calmly. "I'm confident that anyone who sees this exchange will understand exactly what happened here. You came in with an agenda to be combative, and you succeeded. But that's not what this program is about." Meghan grabbed her bag, her movements sharp and angry. "You're going to regret this, Anderson. You think you're untouchable, but everyone falls eventually. Everyone." Cooper remained standing in place, his posture relaxed despite the tension. "I'm not worried about regrets. I'm confident in how I conducted myself tonight. I wish I could say the same about you." "Of course you'd say that," Meghan shot back, moving toward the edge of the set. "You people always think you're right, always think you're justified, but history will show who was really in the wrong here." "Perhaps it will," Cooper said quietly. "But right now, I'm asking you one final time to leave the set. This interview is over." Meghan stopped at the edge of the studio lights, turning back one more time. "You know what the worst part is? I actually thought you might be different. I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd be fair. But you're just like all the rest. Another disappointment." Cooper's expression softened slightly, but his resolve didn't waver. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I truly am. But fairness doesn't mean agreeing with everything someone says or avoiding difficult questions. It means treating everyone with the same standard of professionalism. And I've done that tonight, even when it wasn't reciprocated." Meghan shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Keep telling yourself that, Anderson. Keep telling yourself you're the good guy. Maybe one day you'll even believe it." With that, she turned and walked off the set, her heels clicking sharply against the studio floor. The crew stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Cooper remained standing in his spot, watching her leave. He took a deep breath, then turned to the camera. "I apologize to our viewers," he said, his voice back to its normal, measured tone. "That's not how we hoped this evening would go. We invited our guest here tonight, hoping to have a meaningful conversation about important topics. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible. We always strive to create an environment where honest dialogue can happen, but that requires participation from both sides." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "In all my years of journalism, I've learned that the best interviews happen when both people come to the table with mutual respect and a genuine desire to communicate. When one person arrives with anger and accusations, no amount of patience or professionalism can bridge that gap." Cooper glanced toward where Meghan had exited, then back to the camera. "We prepared thoughtful questions. We wanted to give her a platform to share her perspective. But from the very first moment, it was clear that she had no interest in having a conversation. She wanted a confrontation." He straightened his papers on the desk, a gesture that seemed more about composure than necessity. "Journalism isn't about protecting people from questions they don't like. It's not about providing a platform for one-sided narratives. It's about seeking truth and understanding through dialogue. And dialogue requires two people willing to engage honestly and respectfully." The studio remained quiet except for Cooper's voice. The crew members, veteran professionals all, had witnessed countless interviews, but this was something different. This was a moment that would be discussed and analyzed for days to come. "We don't end interviews lightly," Cooper continued. "We've had guests who've disagreed with us, who've challenged our questions, who've pushed back on our premises. That's healthy. That's what journalism should be. But there's a difference between vigorous debate and personal attacks." He looked directly into the camera. "What you witnessed tonight was someone who came prepared for battle, not conversation. Every question was met with hostility. Every attempt at dialogue was rebuffed with accusations. At a certain point, you have to recognize when something isn't working and have the courage to say so." Cooper's expression showed something between disappointment and resolve. "I've interviewed world leaders during times of crisis. I've spoken with people who've survived unimaginable tragedies. And yet, we found ways to have productive conversations because there was mutual respect. Because there was a recognition that communication requires listening as much as speaking." He shifted slightly. "Tonight, we didn't have that. We had someone who seemed determined to be offended, who interpreted every question as an attack, who saw malice where none existed. And when that's the starting point, there's nowhere productive to go." The weight of the moment seemed to settle on Cooper's shoulders, but he didn't slump. He remained upright, professional, composed. "We will continue to invite people from all perspectives onto this program. We will continue to ask difficult questions, but we will also continue to expect a basic level of civility and respect from our guests." He paused. "What happened here tonight is unfortunate. It's not what we wanted. It's not what our viewers deserved. But it's also a reminder that sometimes the most revealing moments in journalism happen when the interview falls apart. Character is revealed not just in what people say, but in how they treat others when things get difficult." Cooper glanced down at his notes, then back up. "We'll return after this break with our scheduled segment. Thank you for your understanding and your continued trust in this program." As the camera pulled away, Cooper remained at the desk, his expression thoughtful. Around him, the crew slowly began to move, resuming their duties, processing what they had just witnessed. So the interview that was supposed to last an hour had ended in less than 15 minutes. In the hallway outside the studio, Meghan was already on her phone, her voice carrying back toward the set. Her words were sharp, her tone defensive, already spinning her version of events. But inside the studio, Cooper simply sat, a veteran journalist who had just witnessed something rare. A guest so consumed by their own narrative that they couldn't see how poorly they were representing themselves. The moment that would define the evening had come and gone in those 33 seconds, when Meghan had declared that Cooper and his show needed her more than she needed them. It was the turning point, the moment when professional courtesy gave way to reality. One of the producers approached Cooper as he sat at the desk. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. Cooper nodded slowly. "I'm fine, just disappointed. I really hoped we could have a real conversation." "You handled it perfectly," the producer said. "You gave her every opportunity to engage properly." "I don't know," Cooper replied. "But I do know that sometimes you have to recognize when something isn't working and have the integrity to end it. Dragging that out wouldn't have served anyone." The producer nodded. "The viewers will understand. Anyone watching could see what was happening." Cooper stood up, removing his own microphone. "I hope so, because that's not who we are. That's not what this show is about. We're here to inform, to give people a platform to share their truths. But that only works when everyone involved is operating in good faith." He walked off the set slowly, his shoulders straight despite the weight of what had just transpired. Behind him, the crew prepared for the next segment, professionals moving with practiced efficiency. The show would go on. It always did. But this night, this interview, and this moment would be remembered. As Cooper walked back toward the studio, he passed a monitor showing the feed from the set. The cameras were being repositioned for the next segment. Everything was returning to normal. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped back into the lights. The remainder of the broadcast went smoothly, but everyone in the studio knew that none of those segments would be what people talked about the next day. When they would talk about the interview that fell apart. They would talk about the guest who couldn't get out of her own way. They would talk about the journalist who maintained his composure. When the broadcast finally ended, Cooper remained at the desk for a moment longer than usual. He thought about all the interviews that had gone right, all the conversations that had mattered, all the times when asking questions had led to understanding and insight. Tonight had not been one of those times. Tonight had been a reminder that sometimes, despite your best efforts, some people simply aren't ready or willing to have an honest conversation. And when that happens, the most professional thing you can do is acknowledge it and move on. As the studio lights dimmed and the crew packed up their equipment, Cooper finally allowed himself to feel the exhaustion of the evening. It had been draining not because of the difficulty of the questions, sure, but because of the constant battle to maintain professionalism in the face of hostility. He gathered his notes, said goodnight to the crew, and headed for the exit. Tomorrow, there would be analysis and commentary. There would be opinions and counter-opinions. But tonight, Cooper just wanted to go home, knowing that he had handled a difficult situation with grace and integrity. The interview that was supposed to be an exclusive look into one person's perspective had instead become a revealing look at character under pressure. One person had maintained composure and professionalism throughout. The other had revealed themselves to be exactly what their critics had always suggested. In those 33 seconds when Meghan had declared that the show needed her more than she needed it, she had sealed the fate of the interview. Everything that followed was simply the inevitable conclusion. Cooper had tried to steer it back on course. He had tried to find common ground. But some conversations are simply not meant to be. And so, on a night that was supposed to feature an insightful interview, 60 Minutes instead aired something far more revealing. A demonstration of what happens when entitlement meets accountability, when defensive narratives meet simple questions, when someone convinced of their own victimhood cannot recognize their own role in the situations they complain about.